Croeso nôl, pawb. Welcome back, everybody. Lovely to see you, bright and bushy-tailed, on this second day of our governing body meeting. I am delighted to be able to be in the chair today and to introduce a very important item about restoring Welsh rivers. So I'm extremely grateful to our guests, and I will ask Archbishop Andy to introduce Mr. James Wallace and Dr. Christian Dunn to present to us. Thank you.
Cadeirydd, diolch o galon, Andrew, Archesgob Cymru. It's an absolute delight for me to be able to welcome two friends to speak about our summit at the end of the year. I also want to pay tribute, if I may, to the representative body who've made it possible for the Church in Wales to fund our gathering towards the end of the year in November, somewhere in the region of 70 people who really have some skin in the game. These are experts, whether they are scientists or conservationists or advocates, those drawn from the farming community. Yesterday I made mention of the problems and challenges faced by water companies, will confer together, gathering in the the Future Inn in Cardiff. Our task will be principally to gather together and to discover a kind of consensus, both around the problems we face and the measures that we need to take in order to address the title of our conference: how do we restore the rivers of Wales? You may not know this, but the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals contain within them the mandate that we need for our gathering. The sixth goal reads that every availability and sustainable management of water and sanitation should be a priority for all nations. Just a couple of weeks ago, you may have watched the boat race. You may have seen the difficulties that were encountered by both teams, being told they should not enter the water because if they did, the chance of getting E. coli was very considerable. Thames Water, 72 billion litres of sewage discharges have taken place since 2020. 6,590 hours, 11 minutes, and 54 seconds, no less. We know there are enormous structural challenges that we face. They are of agriculture, of industry, the increased usage, and a failing Victorian drainage system, all present in a context of climate change. The good news is that it doesn't need to be like this. In outlining the problems, there is something that can be done. And the session that we're invited to this morning, apart from this brief introduction, we'll see both our guests address the challenges we face and what we might do about it. Mr. James Wallace is the CEO for River Action Trust UK and is a conservationist and brings enormous experience in advocacy for change and will address some of the challenges that we face. Dr. Christian Dunn is a reader in natural sciences at Bangor University and director of the Bangor Wetlands Group and director of marketing recruitment for the College of Science and Engineering and associate pro-vice chancellor for sustainability. That puts us in the shade. We're used to long titles and introductions. I had to take a breath before I started. There will be an opportunity for us after the presentations to engage with both of our guests and to ask the questions that might help us become part of a growing momentum for change. So it's my great pleasure to invite, first of all, Mr. James Wallace to speak to us about the challenges that we face. James.
Bore da. Good morning. And thank you for welcoming me. And I'll just quickly say, in case you're wondering why I'm wearing my label here, it's because of breakfast. And if what they say about cleanliness and godliness is true, then like our rivers, I might be in a bit of trouble. I'm really honoured to be speaking with the governing body of the Church of Wales today and truly humbled by the obvious care and concern that you all show towards the environment in Wales. We are nature. Everything we do depends on healthy ecosystems, abundant water, and every household, school, business, farm, church requires clean rivers. But, tragically, only 40% of Welsh rivers are in good ecological condition. That's better than England's 15%, but still many are on the verge of ecological collapse, such as the River Taff in Pembrokeshire. Nearby, my grandfather farmed at Narberth, but if he was alive today, he just would not recognise the intensive dairy farming that farmers need to undertake to make a living today. Recent research shows that 53 cows can emit as much pollution as the untreated sewage from a town of 10,800 people. But how can farmers be expected to have the investment and capacity to sustainably manage manure when they make just 1p in the pound of farm profits? The rest goes to corporate intermediaries and retailers, where many lose money for every litre of milk they produce, where they have to borrow half of the money to build just simple slurry storage units. The industrial intensification of agriculture has been driven by multinational corporations, not small farmers. And it has come at the cost of those farmers' livelihoods and, tragically, in many cases, their lives, and the lives of our treasured wildlife in Wales. The River Wye, for example, suffers from 3,000 tonnes of phosphate nutrient pollution annually from 25 million chickens housed in factory farms across the catchment in Wales and in England. Salmon, beautiful maiden's hair ranunculus, kingfishers, invertebrates, and all those other species, numbers are crashing. The University of Lancaster predicts that even this most protected and treasured river of Wales and England is on the cusp of what is now called ecocide. So River Action, my organisation, has supported communities to gather evidence and target together the polluters like Avara, which is also known as Cargill, America's biggest independent food business, and the Environment Agency in England. Our judicial review was held in Cardiff on the 7th of February and saw major protests, national media, and battling barristers witness us, just a small but committed charity, asking the government to simply enforce the law. We will be pursuing similar claims in Wales soon. However, the University of Cardiff points out that it's not just agriculture that's the source of the problem. 25% of the problem in the Wye comes from water companies. Sadly, Archbishop Andy was chastised yesterday by a senior member of the water industry for daring to mention sewage in a catchment that is known for factory farm pollution. Well, I say thank you, Archbishop, for your leadership and your visionary foresight and insistence on working together. It's exactly what we need right now. It's absolutely right to gather data and to use it for the common good, to politely call out Dair Cymru spilling 1 million hours of untreated sewage on 115,000 occasions into Welsh rivers last year. It's also right to respect Professor Peter Hammond's observation that approximately 40 wastewater treatment plants in the Cardigan Bay area are operating in breach of their permits, and that sewage is spilled into Cardigan Bay 200 days of each year. These are facts. And when used without blame, they can mobilise people across Wales to help hold their heads and their hands up and work together. So let's not fight each other. Let's not deny these historic truths, but recognise that the problems our rivers face are systemic and they are complex, with multiple causes, and resolving them is the responsibility of all of us. For example, 500 tonnes of harmful metal leaks into rivers in Wales from abandoned mines each year. Road runoff blights rivers across the nation with microplastics. Developers still insist on building on floodplains without adequate sewage treatment. The government doesn't require water companies to remove harmful pathogens, even from final treated effluent. And despite climate breakdown and worsening cycles of drought and flood, we Brits still treat rainwater like a waste, and we rush it off to the sea. Our sewage systems across Britain combine rainwater and sewage. Infrastructure has not been maintained, whether it's by privately owned English companies like the aforementioned Thames Water, publicly owned nationalised water companies like Scottish Water, or not-for-profits like Welsh Water. Billions of pounds have been wasted. Again, a fact. And in many cases siphoned off rather than invested in our shared future. When large corporates operate in a geographic monopoly, as is the case across Britain, without proper regulation, they tend to fail to deliver the service they are meant to, and they will often profiteer at the cost of communities and nature. This is what we have all witnessed across Britain for decades. Funding has been cut too across all regulators, including Natural Resources Wales. Just 83 dairy farms were inspected between 2020 and 2022, and 80% of those were in breach of environmental regulations. There is no shortage of evidence to point the finger at polluters. Many Welsh rivers are full of sewage and farm manure, but now is the time to work together as one. We are communities, we are farmers, we are water company employees, we are shoppers, swimmers, workers, voters. We are the people whose bellies are filled by our neighbours, and also who get sick when rivers are poisoned. We need to champion farmers, to put them back at the centre of communities, to work in partnership with the Welsh NFU and dairies and charities like the Wildlife Trust and my organisation, River Action, to pressure retailers to pay a fair price to farmers for their produce, and to have a government that both incentivises good farming practices and penalises those that persist in breaking the law. We need to respectfully ask water companies like Welsh Water to acknowledge their part in the problem and the solution, and to invest in their leaky infrastructure and put people and planet at the top of their priorities. We need to establish a consensus that, without judgment, rivers in Wales are in peril. The reasons why, and therefore what we can all do together, be it farmers, water companies, academics, communities, charities, government, developers, businesses, to resolve the crisis for everyone's benefit, not least our children and grandchildren. So in conclusion, the Church of Wales is in a unique position. You represent and serve rural and urban communities across the country. You own land in every catchment. You are impartial and, unusually, truly independent. You have a mission to nurture God's people and protect God's earth. So who better to drive forward this essential environmental programme of preparation for what is sadly a difficult future for us all and for our planet? So I welcome the leadership from Archbishop Andy and hope that you all will take this call to action to save Welsh rivers back to your parishioners and your communities, and to insist, as you always do, in working with love, mutual respect, humility, creativity, and energy for the common good. We are in a freshwater emergency, and it's time we acted with the necessary urgency. Your country needs you. I look forward to seeing you, at least some of you, in the Restoring Welsh Rivers Summit in November. Diolch. Thank you.
Borodor, thank you very much for inviting me here. I'm Christian, and thank you much for the Archbishop for reading out all my titles, but really, all I do is look at mud. That is it. I'm a wetland scientist. I spend my time looking at mud. And what James was really talking to you there about the problems that we are facing, this crisis that we are facing when we're looking at our rivers, is our rivers are being attacked in three ways. I'm very much aware of my audience here, so I won't be referring to this as an unholy trinity. I shall instead refer to it as a trident of attack. Because you have three types of different pollutants, really, when we have our rivers. The first one is the nitrates and phosphates. Those are the chemicals, the excess nutrients, which creates eutrophication. This is when algae grows on a river to such an extent that it takes away all the oxygen and can kill an entire ecosystem. When we have a pollution event, whether that is from agriculture or whether it is from sewage or various others, that is what is possibly happening to an ecosystem. You are killing an ecosystem. And the second attack, the second prong of our trident, oh yes, it's there behind me, here we go. One second prong of attack is viruses and bacteria, pathogens. E. coli, norovirus. These are viruses and bacteria which can make humans ill and animals ill as well. And we have them, especially when we have one of those sewage outflows. The third attack is perhaps the most worrying, because this is the unknowns. These are the chemicals and the compounds which we don't really measure, and crucially, we don't really know the effects, the full effects that these can be having on us. These are things such as pharmaceutical waste. We all take medicines to get better, but some of those aren't broken down. Some are broken down to a certain extent, but they end up in the sewage system. There's things like antibiotics. There's also microplastics and so-called forever chemicals. Those are also going into our rivers. So our rivers are facing this trident, not unholy trinity, a trident of attack on our rivers. So what are we going to do about it? Well, we need actually to take 4 actions. And I was trying to think of something glamorous, like a trident, to demonstrate the attack or the defense that we have. But I couldn't, and so I came up with a garden spade, okay? Because I'm a gardener, and garden spades are a practical, a functional tool. We need a garden spade to protect our rivers. And so the first prong of the garden spade is, it's not an elephant in the room. It really isn't. The water industry is not fit for purpose. It's not what society wants, and it is most certainly not what the environment needs. And it's not controversial to say this. The water industry themselves are saying, we have not done well. We need to do better. UK Water, body that represents all the water companies, are saying this. And it's not to say, I'm not picking on water companies. I'm picking on the industry. That's all the regulators. It's everything involved in the water industry. It needs to do better. And it's not controversial to say that. So when the Archbishop commented about this and Welsh Water didn't like it, that's wrong of Welsh Water. They admitted they are not doing well enough. So it's crazy to try to defend them in that way. So that's the first one. The second one is a water-conscious construction industry. We have too much concrete. Fact. That's it. We have not built roads. We've not built developments. Dare I say it, we've not built this building in a way which is water-conscious. It's not taking into consideration that when it rains, which it does in Wales, as we all know occasionally, now and again, when you have all that rain, what happens to it is when it hits the concrete, roofs, the concrete, it goes straight into a drainage system, which all too often then combines with the sewer system. And then that just physically overloads the sewage system. So no treatment plant in the world can cope with that amount of liquid to treat. So that is why we have so often these sewage outflows. We must build better. What we need to start doing is having SUDs, sustainable drainage systems. As a matter of course, we have any new development. Now these can look fantastic, little mini parks on street corners, because all it is more soil. It is a way of getting more soil into our infrastructures so that when it rains, instead of hitting the concrete and then going down the drains, the water soaks into the ground. They can look really beautiful on street corners. Or they can be something as simple as permeable paving. So the picture on the bottom left there is not an excuse to show my beautiful but very, very old motorhome. It is to show you that a car park in France, nearly all the car parks in France, have permeable paving. Why don't we have that in the United Kingdom? Why don't all our supermarkets in Wales have permeable paving? It would help solve some of the problem. So, and the third one is nature-based solutions. This is the secret power that we have to solving this crisis of our rivers. We need to use the natural function of our landscape to help us here. And nature can do this. Nature can remove pollution. Wetlands, marshes, fens, bogs, they are the superheroes of the natural world when it comes to helping us here. The fantastic combination of the plants, the soil, and the water can remove pollution, all sorts of pollutions, high nitrogens, phosphates, the pharmaceutical waste. They can break down, these microbes can break down so many of these pollutants. But we've destroyed our wetlands. Since the industrial age, we've destroyed around about 75% of our wetland habitats. We need to be restoring, managing, and also reintroducing, creating wetlands in this country on nothing short of a war footing if we want to solve this problem. Riparian wetlands, that kind of soggy bit between the water and the land, nice reeds, a few willow trees. If you look at a river now, so few of those areas, those riparian wetlands, those buffer strips exist. If you look, so many of our rivers, they've been canalised. There's solid walls around them. That's completely wrong. Those riparian buffer strips can help clean our water. The other thing that we can do is be looking at things like reforesting some of our uplands as well, to again slow the flow of water when we have those heavy rainfall events, stop our rivers from spiking, getting really high peak levels. So much we can do to improve our natural landscape. Let nature help us solve this problem. But there's also the other benefits of doing that. We call them, in my world, stacked benefits. Because as soon as you look after your landscape, yes, you're improving the quality of your water potentially. You're also, something that's not really talked about, is you're controlling or helping control the levels of our water. Because that's also a problem. We all concentrate on water pollution, quite rightly. But there's another problem as well, and that is controlling the levels of our rivers. In the summer, many of our rivers go dangerously low. In the winter, they flood. And again, that's because we've not looked after our natural landscape. We've got rid of the wetlands, those natural sponges, which during the heavy rainfall events soak up the water, and then when it starts to dry down, release it slowly into our rivers. So that's the water management side of things is an unspoken part of the problem here. We have the solution if we looked after our natural landscapes better. And then the fourth one is really where the Archbishop's idea to bring people together in the summit really is the most crucial thing that we can do here. And that is, we have to accept that there is individual and social responsibility with this problem. We cannot put all the blame on this on one industry. We have got to this point because of societal failure over many decades, from many different industries and from our individual actions as well. And we have to start taking some individual responsibility for this. People flush the wrong things down the loo. That causes blockages. That causes problems for the pollution events as well. People don't even think, but when you drop litter in a street, that can end up in the sea. This fantastic sign there, again in France. France seem to have really got the idea of this. But there's a drain there, and it says, the sea starts here. And people don't think about that in the UK. They don't think that if they're in inland city, that drain is actually potentially going to the sea. So when you drop a piece of litter, that ends up in the drain. It creates a blockage there, and it causes problems. Or it goes to the sea and causes pollution on our coasts as well. So we've got to start taking individual responsibility for this. We've got to come together as a society to do something like this. So that is why the Church in Wales event in November is so important, to bring different people, different bodies, different organisations together in a neutral and an open way. We have to solve this problem with a nuanced, open debate. And that could, but it will, be uncomfortable for various sectors of our society, and it could also be uncomfortable for us as individuals. But we need to do that if we want to, and we must address this crisis. So there we go. Thank you very much indeed.
I suspect that last point probably resonated with most of us. What can we do? You must have questions you want to ask our guests. This is your opportunity, so please do use the lectern and come forward. Let's form a strong, steady queue, and I can see Rosie's kicking things off first of all. But let's have many, many interactions and see where that takes us. Rosie.
Rosie Diamond, Esgobaeth Bangor, Cleric Cwyr, rwy fi eisiau siarad yn Gymraeg eto. Wel, dim syndod i chi ar chesgob fi'n awyddus iawn i siarad. Mae'n mor gyffrous gwrando ar eich cyflwyniadau a chlywed am cynhadledd a fydd yn rhoi gweithredu dros yr amgylchedd reit yng nghanol cenhadaeth yr eglwys o'r diwedd. So fi wrth fy modd a diolch yn fawr iawn i chi. Fi hefyd yn falch iawn bod fi'n gweithio mewn ardal weinidogaeth sydd efo enw afon yn enw'r ardal, sef Beino Sant uwch Gwirfau. Ac mae'r Gwirfau, ond yn afon bach iawn, sy'n rhedeg o Rhyddi, Llyn y Gadair a Llyn Cwellyn i lawr i'r afon Menai. Ond afon bach, ond afon sy'n bwysig iawn, enghraifft o ran poblogaeth y Torgoch, yr Arctic Char a lot o bethau eraill. Wrth gwrs, wrth glywed enw Rhyddi, fi'n siŵr bydd llawer o bobl yma yn meddwl am enw T.H. Parry Williams, un o'n beirdd enwocaf. A hefyd, wrth gwrs, oedd A. Williams Parry yn dod o Dyffryn Nanlle ger yr un ardal. A wnaeth o sgwennu yn yr 20fed ganrif am Dyffryn Nanlle ddoe a heddiw. A wnaeth o sôn am y ffaith does ond un llyn yn Baladeilyn nawr a rheswm oedd y chwareli a gwaith y chwareli. So, cwestiwn fi yw, wel, dyma cwestiwn, really, gwych clywed yr holl bosibiliadau am i ni weithredu, ond sut da ni'n medru newid y ffordd pobl yn behafio? I fi, mae wastad yr her a chi di gofyn am greadigrwydd o ran ein hymateb. So, y cwestiwn really yw meddwl am y beirdd yn sôn am yr amgylchedd yn y gorffennol. Pwy yw'r llenorion heddiw sy'n cynnig ymateb creadigol i'r argyfwng? A pwy fydd yn y cynhadledd yn mis Tachwedd mwyn helpu ni i rhannu stori newydd o ran yr amgylchedd. Diolch o galon.
Diolch yn fawr, Rosie. Please feel free to respond and let's start a dialogue going. Please come to the...
Thank you for the question.
To wait and ask your question.
As much as I enjoy writing poetry, I'm not sure I'm the best person to advise on who to go to for succour on this particular subject. I'm sure you guys know far more than me. As far as bringing about societal change is concerned, I hope I emphasised clearly that we're in this together. And ultimately, it starts with an acceptance and a general understanding of the crisis we face. And I wrapped up by using the term freshwater emergency, and I'm not exaggerating. So if we can start to think of this as an existential threat now, not just in 50 years' time as we used to feel when it came to climate breakdown and pollution and so on, but actually now, can we imagine a world where, and a Wales where we can't actually water our crops? I mean, just sit with that for a moment. I mean, imagine Wales running out of drinking water and food, because I'm afraid to say we are heading in that direction, and not just Wales, but the whole of Britain and the whole of Europe, in fact. When we start looking at migration and the movement north, as we're seeing now already from the Sahara, of course, and southerly too, how are we going to be perceived ourselves when we have to move north in 50, 100 years' time? How are we going to be treated by our neighbours? How are we treating people now ourselves? So I think it's a combination of a general coming together and awareness of just how truly scary and worrying this future and this immediate future is for all of us. And then an embracing, well, I used the term love earlier, and I really mean it. I think this all starts and ends with compassion and collaboration and collegiate behaviour and taking shared responsibility. And whilst, if any of you follow social media, you'll see that people like myself and Christian, it's our jobs to point and poke a bit, but also to embrace and hold hands. And so that's what I would like you personally to take away from today, if anything, is that one, we help the nation of Wales to come to a better and shared understanding of the crisis we face, and then we work together without blame, with love and with support and intelligence, and deploy not just technologies, because of course they have a part to play, but collegiate behaviour and work as one.
Thank you, James. More questions? Please come to the microphone.
Hannah Wilkinson, lay member St David's, ex-Environment Agency, ex-Metal Mines Officer for Environment Agency, and since then I've got an MSc in Sustainable Food Production from Bangor University. So I agree with every single word that's been said by the speakers, and I'm very grateful to them for saying it. I think we slightly missed out on the morality of some of the building industry and the construction industry, because there's an awful lot of problems with little builders doing little silly things that accumulates to make the most frightful messes. But what I really want to say is, what can we do that other people can't? Because we're the church. We've got Jesus. We know that God created the world. And therefore, our priority really ought to be helping people to see that. Helping people to see that they've got moral responsibilities, that they're answerable to God for these things. And we can do that whereas other people can't, and I think that's what we should be doing. So I'm very grateful to Andy for organising the conference, but so long as there's that focus that it's actually answerable to God at the end of the day. Thank you.
Diolch yn fawr. Would you like to come and, Ruth, come on up so that you're right by the mic, if that's okay. Would you like to respond straight away? Please do.
Sorry. Yeah, I mean, I'm obviously not going to get involved with the morality side of things at all, but I think you cannot overestimate the importance of the church in Wales getting involved in this. For politicians, for the water industry, for the media, to see that organisations like the church in Wales are going at this, are wanting to make a difference, is so important. When I told my colleagues I'm going to go and speak at Church in Wales event, they're stunned that what, the church in Wales is getting involved in this? But that's such a good thing that this issue has become so important that so many organisations are wanting to get involved and do something. And I think that you should get so much praise for wanting to do that. It is so important. Let's face it, and I'm sure some politicians may be doing it for, just because they want to, but politicians are going to want to do something when they see the level of anger, they see how much people are passionate about this, then they're going to want to do something about it. I mean, there's a general election in, wherever the general election is, but the water pollution issue, a state of our rivers, could contribute to changing the government. I mean, that is absolutely mind-blowing, that the state of our rivers has reached such a point where politicians want to do something about it because they're worried about the public's opinion about it. So it is so important that people, all organisations, but it's fantastic that the Church in Wales is wanting to do something about this. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll take comments, and if you don't mind, we will keep your responses then until we've heard everybody's, if that's okay. So, go ahead.
Ian Black, nominated Dean, actually picking straight up on the general election. I've heard quite a few politicians talking about the first duty of government being the protection of the nation, the protection of the country. I can't think of actually anything that gets nearer the top of the list of protection than the supply of water, clean water, and the protection of our rivers. So my appeal is to all of the politicians who are standing at the next election to make this at the top of your agenda. that cleaning up water is a priority. It is part of the first duty of government to protect. And of course, the first protection is about the welfare of the people, about justice, and it's not just an end in itself. It's what the aim of that is as well. So if they're going to talk about the first duty of government being protection, it's about more than military action. It's got the welfare of the whole people involved in that as well. So that's my appeal. The second bit was really picking up on the permeable paving, which I really like the idea of. And that's an appeal more to us as a church in Wales. We have a lot of properties which have tarmac, and my drive needs resurfacing. So my appeal is I'd love to be one of the first people to have some permeable paving as a replacement drive. I think that's something for the property and parsonages and other people who are involved in buildings. We've got a lot of land area that's covered in paving or tarmac or concrete. Something to put on the agenda.
There's a space for a stall next to the Mothers' Union. Tony.
Tony Mullins, Llandaff, elected. I'm very friendly with the mayor of my stake, the current mayor, who's a member of the Llinvi River Water Group. And they do a tremendous job. They get, on a Saturday, at least 20 bags of rubbish out of the local river. And we've had sewing up as far as Llanganwyd in the river, so something's happening, which is very positive. But Rosie told me, the mayor, she said on one Saturday morning she was actually working in the river with the other volunteers, and this woman came to her garden fence and just threw loads of rubbish over the fence. And she shouted out, "Hey, what do you think you're doing?" And she said, "I do this all the time." So Rosie challenged her again and went to take a photograph of her, and she made a gesture which was not that, and continued to pollute the river. With witnesses. The photograph was forwarded to the local authority, the Environmental Health, and they did nothing about it. So my question is to the governing body, can we as a governing body write to all local authorities with regards to this abuse of what after all is the abuse of God's creation? We have a duty as stewards to this creation, and I think these small little gestures, and 22 county authorities in Wales have environmental departments. They are responsible for fly tipping, and I think it's still fly tipping if you put it in the water. So perhaps we can start doing something quite small, and hopefully it'll reap benefits for all the small little capillary rivers that end up making a very large river going into the sea and carrying. They never have Tesco trolleys down in Ogmore from my stake, because the river group take them out, and that's an effective resolve. So perhaps I suggest that we, possibly Archbishop, represent the governing body's opinion here and send a letter to every local authority. Thank you.
Thank you. Ruth?
Ruth Coombs, co-opted Llandaff. I really want to kind of explore a bit more about what the Dean has just previously said about what can we do with the assets that we've got. We need to set this in the context that the majority of the people that, or a lot of the people that we work with are being badly impacted by cost of living, etc. So there are going to be some tensions, there are going to be balances, but we have got a lot of properties, got a lot of vicarages, we've got a lot of churchyards. A lot of churches are using things like getting involved in things like eco-church. So is there something similar or something that could be looked at in collaboration with that so that we can demonstrate to the people around us that we can do this together and then kind of build a movement? Because I think the church is really good at building movements. Thank you.
Joch, thank you, Ruth. Hayley.
Hayley, elected Archdeacon, St Asaph. I'm actually asking a question on behalf of Dean Nigel from St Asaph Cathedral, and then I have a second question that we share. Llanelwy has two major rivers. One is allowed to expand in flood, the Clwyd, and the other has very high flood defences and is channelled. So should we seriously consider making room for some of our rivers to overflow naturally? And then the second question is, where I am in Rossett and again in Llanelwy, there are houses being built on these floodplains. So we just wonder what your response might be to that. Thank you.
Nicholas Cook, elected lay Monmouth, but I'm going to make a short point as the President of the Provincial Court and the Chancellor of the Diocese of St David's. We have a particular opportunity to do something in the light of what we have been told today, because we are exempted from secular planning control by the ecclesiastical exemption. Therefore, work within the curtilage of and to our buildings is controlled by the faculty system. I wish to encourage the representative body and indeed offer to assist with the preparation of provincial guidance with respect to our pseudo-planning applications, which would indicate a presumption in favour of permeable paving, permeable surfacing for car parks, and where in our historic buildings on occasions we are concerned with the renewal of rainwater goods, that there should be rainwater goods that provide for the collection and hopefully sensible, sustainable reuse of the rainwater that is thereby collected. And I invite suggestions from our guests as to other steps we can take in this direction, and I flag up the urgency of the need to do something in this area. As I say, we have a particular opportunity. We're exempted from the fees that secular people have to pay for planning control because the faculty system is staffed entirely by volunteers. So the money we're saving by having that, we could devote to dealing with things like, well, permeable paving is a bit more expensive. And as my final point, because I don't get the opportunity to talk to such a wide audience, I have to deal with the situation where churches have put down inappropriate paving, and I don't like ordering it to be removed. So please take back to your ministry areas the points that have been made to us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nick. And it's great to have these practical suggestions of what can actually be done. So please carry on.
Melody Lewis, lay member, St Asaph Diocese. I like that you do emphasise individual responsibility, because I think that's something that sometimes gets overlooked. You can kind of push stuff onto big companies and big corporations. But a lot of people, again, sort of pick up on the point that Ruth made about the cost of living crisis, don't have individual economic power that we can put behind choosing what we buy and choosing the food that we buy and the kind of companies that we support. And so I was just wondering if there's anything practical and maybe free that people like myself can do to sort of help the situation.
Thank you very much. Sarah, next, and then Robert.
Sarah Rowland-Jones, Dean of St David's, nominated Dean. Thank you very much indeed. I would like to bring in the very, very big picture, I think, alongside the discussions we've been having about what can individuals do, because it seems to me that we have to look at the way that this is actually symptomatic of a rather larger problem that we face in contemporary society across the economic and political spheres of short-termism in both the public and the private sector, driven by the need to win the next election or to deliver the quickest profit to shareholders. And in the way that the private sector, and I know this because my stepson is an investment banker, and he has taught that the primary role of any economic enterprise is to deliver the maximum profit as soon as possible to shareholders. And things called profit centres, people from whom you extract profit, are your providers and your suppliers, your customers and your employees. Basically screw everybody apart from the shareholder. Don't please quote me on that. And we see it, I mean, you've talked about the difficult relationship that the farming, the whole agricultural sector has with supermarkets. The way that actually one can look at the privatization of utilities, and we've also mentioned the construction industry. I did like your your spade, your fork actually, with his 4 tines. My father was a water engineer, and through the late 70s and the early 80s, he had overall responsibility for water, rivers and sewage for Montgomeryshire, and through the transition from the Montgomeryshire Water Board into the Severn Trent. And he actually then was wringing his hands about the direction of travel, building inappropriately across floodplains, channeling rivers, loss of wetlands, upstream of Shrewsbury, saying everything that was being done to prevent flooding in Shrewsbury was actually the risks of flooding in Shrewsbury were increased because of stupid decisions upstream. So that is, it's been coming for a long time, and it's part of something bigger. Moving to the local, we talked briefly yesterday evening about the River Alyn, which, as many of you will know, runs this far away from St David's Cathedral. It's only 4 miles from source to sea, and in fact, we were dealing with Natural Resources Wales only last week on various issues. They say it's in good quality. But the big problem that Natural Resources Wales have is, as you say, they are massively underfunded. And about a decade ago, I'm not quite sure exactly when, they were forced to withdraw from caring for all but the biggest rivers, and they can only care in part for the big ones. Small rivers have now become the responsibility of those who have riparian responsibility, those who are in charge of the riverbank, which is why I spend a lot of time and actually a lot of money looking after a very short stretch of river. And I won't go into the details of why perhaps this is quite funny, really. They got in touch because they wanted us to take away the sluice so that the eels and the trout could more easily travel up the river. But we have pointed out that it's been there for decades, because if there's a fire, it's how the fire brigade find the water to keep the cathedral wet. And so now we're going to have a mussel rope, and the eels apparently can climb a mussel rope, and the trout will continue to take their chance because they're moderately successful as a general rule. But it's part of the things that you learn when you're a dean. But it seems to me that the role of the church in relation to all of this, that one of the roles, and I think it's one for you, Archbishop, with the platform that you have, is that we actually also have to get involved at the very top of the conversation about what is the shape of the socio-economic structuring of our nation. What sort of country are we to be in Wales and the UK more widely, not just in the short term, but in the long term, and to help people, those who have the good intentions, to get into the debate, the real need to look at the long term as well as the short term, the big picture as well as just looking at small sectors that are impacted, and that's about human well-being and the well-being of the planet. So the big story as well as the little one. Diolch yn fawr.
Diolch, Sarah. Robert.
Thank you. Bob Evans, elected lay, Monmouth. I'm also chair of the Monmouth DAC. 2 anecdotes and then some comments, if I may. When I was very little, about 60-something years ago, I lived in Crosskilliog, and I used to walk in the park there alongside a river called the Avon Lwyd. Some of you know it as the Torfaen. In my day, it was yellow, orange. You wouldn't go anywhere near it. You go to it today, and it runs clear. I'm not saying I would drink from it, but certainly there is a huge improvement. And that gives us hope. It shows us what we can do with rivers when we look after them. The second point is that it's not just them, it's us. Our medieval monks who built a lot of our churches were very clever, and they built some very impressive sewage systems. Unfortunately, a lot of those went into the local rivers. And we discovered, I won't tell you which church, but a few years ago that we had a medieval sewer that we thought was going into the town sewage system, but actually was going straight into the Wye. I have to say the Environment Agency and Nature Wales were very good about it, but actually reconfiguring that sewage system was really difficult. these things are not straightforward. Which brings me to my main point, which is building on the comments which have already been made. I think as a church, actually there are a lot of practical things we can do to help. Yesterday we talked about climate emergency, and we talked about a lot of the little things we could do to improve the energy efficiency of our churches. The tiny forests, the solar panels or whatever. I think we need to do the same for water. I think there are lots of positive things we can do. The first is certainly our own sewage systems. We certainly as a DAC would not approve main sewage for new WC facilities for churches. We are looking at all sorts of technologies. There's a wonderful rural church which is actually using a solar-powered toilet, would you believe? It cycles the air over the sewage system to dry it out. So there are lots of things we could do there which have a small but demonstrative effect. The second is this point about permeable drainage, and that's a real problem for us in our DAC. We have lots of requests for new paving, new car parking, and I have to say we're not doing too badly at the moment at actually saying they need to be permeable. We haven't had the Dean's driveway yet, and I'm not sure it will come to the DAC, but I'm sure we'll apply the principle. And the other one, let's not forget, is our churchyards and our glebe land. I think we actually have a good record there, but they are an asset. They do help with the drainage and the soil preservation, and it's something we need to hold up there. So I think it would be really helpful as a result of this discussion and for the summit in November, we actually had a modest programme of the things that we can do with our buildings and our environment to actually aid this programme. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Great practical suggestions. Do come forward. Thank you.
Dylan Williams, etholedig Esgobaeth Bangor, I'm going to speak in Welsh, if you'd like to put your headgear on. Diolch yn fawr i'r ddau gyfaill sydd ochr i chwith i fan hyn am yr cyflwyniad, nes i fwynhau o yn fawr iawn. A beth oedd yn galwnogi fi yn y lle cyntaf oedd bod na ddim bai yn llwyr yn cael ei roed wrth draed amweithwyr Cymru. Oherwydd yn rhy aml ar y cyfryngau, dyna da ni'n ei weld bai yr amweithwyr ydi o i gyd. Ac yn gogledd Orllewin Cymru, lle dwi'n byw, ffermydd bach sy'n yna. A mae'r ffermydd bach yn cael ei yn fwy a mwy anodd i gynnal bywoliaeth, i ddweud y gwir tha chi. Mae'n anodd deall weithiau sut maen nhw'n syrfeifio o flwyddyn i flwyddyn gyda llawer iawn o anawsterau wedi creu gan wleidyddiaeth yn aml iawn yn cael ei roed o'i blaenau. Felly, pa mae'r gynhadledd i ymdrin a afonydd ein cenedl yn dod i fyny nes ymlaen yn y flwyddyn, ga i ofyn i'r archesgob yn garedig i gydweithio ac i roi gwahoddiad i Undeb Ymweithwyr Cymru i fod yn bresennol. Oherwydd hebdyn hwynt, fysa fo fel siarad i ysgol heb athrawon yn bresennol. Oherwydd os oes rhywun yn gwybod tirwedd ei ffermydd, y ffermwyr yr amweithwyr ydw i hynny. Oherwydd yna genedlaethau ar ôl genedlaethau sy'n mynd yn ôl ganrifoedd weithiau. Maen nhw'n gwybod bob twll a chornol y ffarm. A fysa nhw'n gallu cydweithio, dwi'n siŵr sy'n nhw fodlon cydweithio, ond mae'r rhaid iddyn nhw fod ar rhan o'r sgwrs o'r dechrau cyntaf, os da ni am symud pethau ymlaen. Diolch yn fawr iawn.
Diolch yn fawr. Hazel. Yeah. Hazel, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for your presentation. It was very enlightening. It's a question for you that I have been challenged as a householder that with our obsession for cleanliness, that we use chemicals in the house that are actually banned by the farming industry. So I'd like to know you know, how much we should be aware of what we use in our houses to keep ourselves clean. Diolch yn fawr.
Diolch, Hazel. Can I ask anybody who wants to make a further comment to come so that we can see and use our time before I ask our colleagues to respond? But thank you.
Rebecca Sperry-Taylor, elected St Asaph. One of my churches uses Forest Church as an evangelistic sort of outreach into the community, and as well as meeting on a Sunday, they also at the moment are working with the local council to go out and to fix all of the stiles and gates on all our local footpaths. But the funding for that is running out, and we're sort of looking for something else that new community can do. So I was just wondering, although obviously that, you know, you can do one-off things like replacing your paving in your churchyard, what can we do regularly on a practical level as churches outside in the community? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Geraint John, elected cleric, Diocese of Llandaff. As a church, we have become better at investing in mission. And if we're prepared to accept the 5th mark of the 5 marks of mission to safeguard the integrity of creation, then I wonder what we can do to invest bigger, to allow others to do that part of mission for us as well, to put our money where our mouth is. I'd like to congratulate the Archbishop in rattling Dŵr Cymru slightly, but reading through some of the statistics, and they say that 44% of our rivers are good. They're putting that across as if that's a really, really good thing, but it doesn't sound like a particularly good statistic to me. So I just wonder if we, as a wider church, are able to invest. We can go nowhere near the, I think it's 4 billion that Dŵr Cymru are investing over the next 5 years, but we can add something to that, and even if it is a small amount, then hopefully it can make a difference. So I suppose it's a question, what can we, as the wider Church in Wales, do to invest in the mission of safeguarding the integrity of our creation?
Diolch yn fawr, Geraint. Oh, another one. Thank you.
Robert Charlton, elected lay member, Swansea and Brecon. We've been talking a little bit, various suggestions have been made about what we can do, simple, practical suggestions. And I'd like to put forward a suggestion to all of us who actually have a garden, and that relates to parsonages and private homes, etc. We can do a lot to help the environment. Please encourage a natural garden. No pesticides, no weed killers, no paving over gardens to put your car on the front forecourt, etc. And certainly no artificial grass. We can all do that. In fact, this will save us money because all those other items I mentioned cost money. And we need to encourage natural environments, and that includes us. Purely natural garden. If we have weeds, so be it. We don't kill them. A lot of life and environmental good comes from them. So that is my practical suggestion that I think we can all do that will cost us nothing and will save us money. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Could I invite our guests, James and Christian and Archbishop Andy, to respond to those? You can see how engaged everybody is with this, and your summary and response is very welcome. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you, everyone, for so many wise comments and observations and questions. I'm going to talk quickly about the systemic side of things and a couple of examples, and then Christian's going to talk to a lot of those questions around what can you do. Of course, there'll be overlap. Rivers are the lifeblood of our land. Let's not forget it. And we've made, I hope, that point quite clear today. Capillaries, a gentleman mentioned a moment ago. And in order for change to happen, and this short-termism that Sarah mentioned, to be overcome, we do need whole systems change here. We need a paradigm shift in how we value our rivers, our water, our sea, and the life within it, and the life that it brings and gives to us. And that needs to come through a combination of things, I believe, and those include a complete and utter shake-up of the way that regulation is done in Natural Resources Wales, in the Environment Agency, Ofwat, and so on. So we need reform here. That will only happen after the next election, and of course we have the elections in Wales next year as well, too, in the Senate. So add those two together, we have a fantastic opportunity here, regardless of the parties that take control, and it really does not matter which party or individuals. It's about us working together to be able to completely reshape how we set the law and enforce it, and to actually enforce it. So, for example, the legal action that River Action's undertaken just recently on the Wye is in fact currently targeting English law. It's called the Farming Rules for, the Farming Rules for Water. That has not been enforced once. That law came into position 6 years ago. It's insane. So how can we possibly call those regulators? Secondly, we need to make sure that, as Christian mentioned earlier, and I think I did too, that we need to change and restructure our water industries across Britain, not just in Wales. And we need to take the profit imperative as secondary or tertiary to those to humans and nature. We can give some examples here as well, and when it comes to farming and how we can incentivize better practice. Now, of course, there is a very, very difficult subject here, and that is how do we make sure farmers get a fair bang for buck? You know, this 1p in the pound is nonsense. All that other money tends to go abroad and to the hands of big corporations and institutional investors and so on, pension funds and so on. This is not fair. And to expect those people, of which there may even be farmers in the room, I come from a farming family, I'm sure many, many people here do too, where they are struggling for their livelihoods. That is totally and utterly unfair, and it's unrealistic of us as a society to put all that pressure on those individual farms who are often really struggling to survive. And let's not forget, suicide in farmers is a very real and present threat, and it has been for a long time, and that is unforgivable. So we need to embrace the farming community, and when the government, whatever that government looks like after the election this year and next year, needs to incentivize and look after those people. So, for example, I did a project a couple of years ago on the other side of the border around riparian buffers. Funny we should be talking about that earlier. And that was a really generous farm payment scheme to create zones, buffer zones, that allow that soft space that Christian was referring to re-wet rivers and remove these hard edges, reduce cattle poaching, for example, and just allow the river to breathe a bit. Also, to re-wiggle, what a wonderful word that is, to re-wiggle our rivers and to allow them to form braided systems across floodplains again. To put planning moratoriums on floodplain development. It's just so obvious. We should not be building houses in floodplains. We know it doesn't work. It's ridiculously expensive. The sewage capabilities are never able to handle the volume that comes. And let's not forget just how wet and dry it's going to be in the near future. So those sorts of farm payment schemes exist. We need more of them. We need to be generous towards people. And finally, when it comes to the farming community, we have the pleasure of Aled Jones, the head of the Welsh NFU, on our steering committee. Andy very wisely targeted and engaged very constructively with Aled, and he works with me and Christian and the others on forming this wonderful event that we're hosting together with Andy, or rather he's hosting and we're supporting in November. So it's absolutely front and centre that the farming community and those people that represent them are at the table, and that we leave that meeting with one single objective, and that is that we all form a consensus that we are actually in a crisis and we want to work together to resolve it. No blame, not too much backcasting, but looking forwards to constructive solutions. Thanks, and thank you for having me today.
Well, it was absolutely fantastic to see so many questions there. It was most certainly not like one of my lectures when I say at the end, "Is anyone any questions?" and a stony silence. So that was fantastic. Just to address some of those issues. First of all, the St. Asaph, should we allow areas to flood? Oh my goodness, yes, most certainly. Absolutely crucial for so many reasons. But one thing I do want to pick up on there is those stacked benefits I mentioned as well. If we have areas which are allowed to flood, then we're not going to have buildings on them. And hopefully then they can add an area for the local community to walk on, when it's not flooded, obviously, to walk on, so that they get that well-being of being close to the water, being outside. You get those stacked benefits of well-being, which I think are often forgotten about, but are absolutely crucial here. And I'm very, very glad that permeable paving was picked up on so much, although I'm sure you're all really just admiring my beautiful, very old motorhome there. And I cannot express enough how important it is that wherever we can do those sorts of changes to how we are building things, that is absolutely essential. I think it's crazy, for example, that where I am in Chester, that I can tarmac over my entire drive if I wish. If I've got kind of like a double drive, well, an area for a double drive, and I've just got kind of already one driveway, one place for one car, I can just tarmac over the other bit without any planning permission whatsoever. I think it's crazy. I think we need, this is when it's societal rethinking has to come in. We have to make sure that people are aware that by tarmacking over your entire drive, you're getting rid of some grass, some soil, and that is going to cause a problem. So it's fantastic to see that people are taking it seriously here and thinking what they can do with their churches and their buildings. I should have also, though, because if people were so passionate about that, talked about one other little tiny thing that you could do, and that is no downpipe from your roofs should go straight into a gutter. None of them should do that. What you should have instead is some kind of planter right next to it, which can look fantastic, look pretty, but also it slows that flow of water down again. And that's what we're trying to do here. It's all about slowing the flow. So none of your churches with those downpipes should go straight down into drain. Have a beautiful planter there as well. So please, I could encourage you to do that as well. Chemicals. Okay, so somebody mentioned chemicals in the houses as well. Yes. And then it's individual actions. This is when it all starts to form together, hopefully, here. There are simple steps that we can do, not using hard chemicals when we're doing cleaning, etc. There are others available, and those of us that kind of have septic tanks kind of are aware of that, but others aren't. So please be aware that you can change, and it doesn't cost much more money or any more money to change your cleaning products, for example. These are the simple individual steps that we can take. Other individual steps, I'm sure aware of, you were talking about gardening there. If anybody uses tap water to water their garden, audience again, that shouldn't be classed as a sin, forgive me, but that is bad. That is very, very bad. They should be using a water butt as well. What else? Yeah, I just want to kind of really end as well with something. This is, and I don't want to kind of teaching granny suck eggs and things like this, but one thing that I've found when it's involved with engaging the community, engaging people with these sorts of with these sorts of actions they need to take, or just making them aware. I got very much involved at the time before David Attenborough mentioned it, so really nobody cared until he did, which is plastic waste, plastic pollution. Trying to get people to reduce their plastic. I started a campaign to make Chester the first city to stop using plastic drinking straws. And I say, nobody cared until David Attenborough mentioned it, and then it was all different. But one thing that I did that I found really engaged people was organise a litter pick. And I did it to start with thinking this is going to be the most embarrassing thing. I'm going to stand on a street corner with a load of litter picks and no one's going to turn up. It was incredible. The community love litter picks. And we're also, as well, often trying to find somewhere to store our litter picking stuff. We need a hub to store it. If you have churches, perhaps that's something that you could do. Organising these litter picks is a great way to bring people together. And once they're there doing something, cleaning up a river would be even better. Now we're kind of ticking boxes here. Then you can start to talk to them. They're meeting other like-minded people as well. And from a single litter pick, huge things can grow. We have a huge problem here. We're not going to solve it overnight. There's no silver bullet. And it's, if I bring back the old kind of speech about how do you eat an elephant, well, you eat it one bite at a time. And that's what we have to do here. We have a huge problem. We have to tackle it bit by bit. Thank you very much indeed.
My starter for 10 on what can we do practically, wet wipes. We should ban wet wipes. We should certainly not flush them down the loo. A recent visit to Five Fords in Wrexham, which is one of the sophisticated water plants, will show you what a fatberg looks like. You want to see something really gross. That's what it is. Don't flush your wet wipes down the loo. It's my great privilege to thank both of our contributors for their contribution and for you for engaging with them, and once more to the church for their support for our summit towards the end of the year. Would you like to give them a thanks in the usual way?
And thanks from me, diolch o galon, to our contributors and to everybody who engaged. Apologies that we've let it run on a little longer, but it was important to have this conversation. Just before we break for coffee, and we'll be back at 11:40, please. We're a little 10 minutes late. Just to remind you that there are these guides for churches to address domestic abuse on your tables. Please take them, please read them and use them. More copies are available from the Mothers Union stall in the foyer, and please look at the lived experience accounts of domestic violence in all its forms that they have there, and use those to inform how we go forward. We don't want to abuse our wonderful environment. We don't want anybody to be abused. So these are all ways that we live out our 5 marks of mission: tell, teach, tend, transform, treasure. So we've had a real starter on how we can strike living water from the stones along our way. Thank you. Diolch o galon to you all. Break for coffee. Thank you.